And I think the thing that we've really learned in our other sports and entertainment businesses has been that it's critically important to be able to give our customer or our buyer or our partner what they want in the medium at which they want it in a digestible way for them to make it easy to gain more traction. What they do in St. Pete and what they do in Long Beach, what they did in Baltimore, I mean, those are huge efforts to try to turn city streets into a fully functioning FIA Grade 1 certified racing circuit. It is not for the faint of heart.
Why Ferraris? Why this passion for vintage automobiles such as a Ferrari, which I know sparked a fire in you at an early age? But why not Porsches?
I think the Ferrari mark is the best representation of passion, engineering, and poise. I asked myself one question, and it was whether or not I have the expertise to do so or the knowledge to do so, and whether or not I get paid for it or not, what is it genuinely that I want to be doing all day, every day? And it was restoring classic cars.
Yeah, look, I think there's two big points I would make, Jason, and I think as you've talked to the key movers in the sport, it's interesting to get their perspectives, right? Because some of them are coming at it from a very European perspective, some of them are coming at it globally, some of them are coming at it commercially. I think from our perspective, we certainly seen great interest in our race, and we continue to see great interest in the Grand Prix, via television ratings, via merchandise, via just general interest socially. Formula One does a nice job of giving us a lot of touch points and a lot of data on that. I think the interesting thing, and something that we've got to do a better job as a promoter, is working closely with, Bobby in Austin and Renee in Las Vegas to make sure that we're working together to really define who that US F1 fan is. And what I mean by that is, we're all consumers. We all like to buy and consume products and services in a way that we want that consumed. And I think the thing that we've really learned in our other sports and entertainment businesses has been that it's critically important to be able to give our customer or our buyer or our partner what they want in the medium at which they want it in a digestible way for them to make it easy to gain more traction, right? And so that's good for our business when we can figure that out. And I would tell you, we're still very early in that process, and we're working hard just like the other two promoters in America are, and certainly maybe even North America, as we've had, built relationships with, our friends in Montreal and Mexico as well, have these same conversations. So on one hand, we've certainly seen great interest, and we're fortunate in Miami here to have seen that interest continue to hold and grow outside of South Florida and across the kind of our domestic marketing platform. But also, I think it's incumbent upon those who are engaged and invested in the sport to make sure we understand who those people are and not group them into one big category of US F1 fans, because I don't think that's fair, and that's not how US consumers are generally used to being treated. They're generally treated in a way that it's very individualized, especially with the growth of the kind of e-commerce ecosystem.
I was surprised to see that in the first year of the race, the Miami race, 60 to 70% of the fans attending were from South Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not something that I would have expected. Did that change at all this year?
It did change a bit, although I would tell you we're still tracking over 50% in terms of the people who are coming to the race. And I would clarify that, who are giving us a South Florida zip code, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing that we've learned, and again, I'm fairly new to South Florida, I've been here less than 3 years, is that there's a lot of people in South Florida who have a condo, apartment, house here that they don't spend the whole year in. And so I do think that's a bit, probably a bit skewed. But look, I think the point is this, is that there is an appetite for Formula One racing and high-end entertainment here in South Florida, and I think we benefit from that tremendously. So to answer your question directly, Jason, it did adjust a little bit down, but not very much, not significantly. And look, our team has tried to make a point of saying, Latin America, Mexico, those are areas that have really indexed highly for us in terms of guests coming to Miami in general, but especially for the Grand Prix. So, we began much more outreach and more aggressive outreach to those communities and making sure that we're building a package that makes it easy for them to come. Same for our European guests. We're seeing an uptick on that side as well of people on the European side of things saying, hey, we'd love to come and check out Miami. And look, I can't say enough about this community and this city and the area of the world in which we live. We're very, very fortunate to have a place. I was on the phone this morning with Niels Vidic, who's the race director for the FIA, and he's going to vacation here for a bit over the holiday. And, we don't, I'm from the Midwest. I'm from a tiny little town outside of Wichita. Like no one's going there over the holiday. So we're very fortunate, and we benefit tremendously from the attachment to the Miami community.
Yeah, and I would think, and you've said this in the past, I would echo it. There'd be a European headline of coming to visit Miami. I mean, that's like a natural. Well, let's go to South Florida in May from Europe and really experience America and also racing that we love in a completely different environment. So I've got to believe that it's gonna skew, especially because you're combining a couple of different products as well. Because the NFL, of course, which you have a strong affiliation to, has made its move into Europe. There's a cross pollination there, right, Tyler?
I think so. Look, I would tell you, my previous life, I worked for the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously the NFL team in Kansas City. And so I was part of a game in Mexico City. We were part of a game in London. And then I was fortunate enough for our owners, Steve Ross and then Tom Garfinkel, allowed me to join the team when the Dolphins, when they played in Frankfurt here about a month ago. And so I will say I have a bit of experience in watching the NFL, kind of go push their domestic barriers into Europe and Mexico as well. And look, I can't say enough about what that team does. They have consistently gotten better. They've consistently built a fan base there. When you go to these markets now, they do a great job of making it feel like an event, and it's an NFL event. That being said, in so many ways, F1 is lapping the competition as it relates to dropping the circus into a community and having it take over. And I saw that on a very small scale in the NASCAR and IndyCar world as I was kind of growing up in this business. But what Stefano and his team have done to put on a show for the consumer when they show up in a community and support the promoter in that can't be understated. And they deserve a lot of credit for that because, whether it was Bernie or Chase or everybody along the way, I will tell you that it is a feeling. And for those of us who have had the opportunity to go to multiple Grand Prix, I think we can all attest to the fact that when you're dropped into that market, it feels like something is happening there.
Yeah. I just had the chance to visit Las Vegas recently for the Formula One race, and it didn't feel like the Las Vegas that I knew previously.
Well, the number of people that I had comments from who were there for other things as they were building the circuit, what Renee and her team did there, it cannot be understated. That is incredibly difficult, and the folks in Singapore and the folks in Baku and some of the other prominent street races, Monaco, around the world, they'll tell you, even on the IndyCar side, like, what they do in St. Pete and what they do in Long Beach, what they did in Baltimore. I mean, those are huge efforts to try to turn city streets into a fully functioning FIA Grade 1 certified racing circuit. It is not for the faint of heart.
What have you learned over the last couple of years about doing exactly that?
Jason,
I'm smarter now about how to run all this, right? As opposed to,
I don't know if I'm smarter. I think we as a team are smarter.
Right.
I think we've gotten better. I think we've made better decisions. But I would say, I was sitting with Sheikh Salman, who's the promoter in Bahrain, when I was in Las Vegas, and he was telling me they're getting ready to, they've already passed their decade and they're on into their second decade of that race. And I think about everything he has learned and how we're only heading into year 3 and we have so much more to learn. So I would say we come at it with a humility. We come at it with there is so much still to learn and to do and to grow and evolve. But yeah, look, I think our team is better. But look, I would tell you the same thing that I would have told you, when I was sitting on a pit box in, Bristol, 15 years ago. It's still all about your people. It's still all about, building a community of people who are pulling in the right direction. And we're so fortunate, Steve and Tom give us the opportunity to chase these dreams, and not everybody gets that. I'll share the story with you. We do an all staff kind of F1 catch up every month, in the fall, right? When we're kind of in planning and prepping stage. And we did ours it was last Tuesday or Wednesday. And so we all gathered in our Paddock Club building, and we just basically share information and make sure people are kind of aligned and on the same page, just like any other business would do. And I looked out there, and Jason, there were almost 300 people in the room. And I think about the other promoters with whom we built relationships and shared challenges, and cried in our beer together and then celebrated together. And I don't think any other promoter has the resource that we do, right? And that's to Steve and Tom's credit for having a vision and really operating this as a shared service group. And as football hopefully begins to wane here toward the end of January, and hopefully finishing with the Super Bowl in February, we've got the cavalry is coming, right? First it kind of hits to our tennis business, and then we get everybody on board to try to really help put this race together. And I can't say enough about that model and how much resource we have there. But it is all about that room of people, Jason. It is. It's not only driving the revenues, but it's making the operations efficient. It's honoring. The gentleman who used to run our community outreach here, Jason Jenkins, passed away, but over a year ago, but honoring him with the community programming in our community here in Miami Gardens. It's not one thing. It's a whole bunch of things and a whole bunch of pieces and parts that come together to pull off a Grand Prix.
You made so many changes, you and the team, in 23. One significant one was to pull people inside the football stadium and really create this garage atmosphere that's unlike anything that I've seen before. I've been at the Austin race, and it's very different than being in a football stadium where you have garage access. That was one of the major things that the team changed. In summation, now, having had a number of months to sit back and think about it, what did you like about what you did in 23 that you changed?
Well, I'll tell you what I like the most is that the team was honest with each other, right? And there were areas that we did not deliver what we intended, and we were honest about it. We put our best people onto those areas, and we attacked. We didn't sit and hope and worry and explain away and just hope it got better, because it's easy to do, right? It's easy to say, well, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, so I guess we're just going to have to leave it. That's not in our DNA here. I'll come back to it again. Like, to have Steve Ross and Tom Garfinkel behind us, they allow us to think like that, right? They allow us the opportunity to go in and attack a problem and not just sit idly by. So I can't say enough about those guys to allow us to do what we do. But I was really proud of the team for attacking an area of opportunity and making it better. The other thing I would say about it is I think when promoters build, in general, when promoters build these Grand Prix, right, we all think about our key stakeholders, and they're different, right, in every situation. Some of them are very heavily governmental, like in the Middle East. You've got different challenges with royalty and different investment groups, and we certainly don't have that here. But we have our kind of group of key stakeholders, and I would tell you that there were 3 areas that we did not do a good job delivering in year one. Right, we didn't take good enough care of the teams. We didn't take good enough care of our partners at Formula One, and we didn't take good enough care of our staff. And that one never gets the headlines, and it never gets taken into consideration. But we hired a new leader enterprise-wide of kind of our guest service experience, named Jose Mola, and he came in, and the first thing he said to me was, he said, Tyler, you sit here and talk about our partners, and you talk about our season ticket, or our ticket buyers, and you talk about the media, and you talk about all these different people. You're not talking about the 10,000 people who pull this thing off. You have to give them more attention. And that is a common thread across the world. When we talk to other promoters, is you're only as good as the person who's standing scanning a ticket, or you're only as good at the person who's handing the person, the drink that they just bought. And so credit to Jose, but I think we made some improvements there. But very proud of the team for attacking the things that didn't go well. Gabby Alexin is somebody who will never get named in an article, but it was absolutely her execution of the paddock and that process that really pulled it together. So very proud of what was put together. And look, we've got improvements we got to make, year over year, and we're going to do those and make it even better next year.
How so? What does 24 look like? I know you're going to be releasing or increasing daily capacity as one of the measures that you'll do. What else do you want to change?
Yeah, look, and the daily capacity again, it's all about the customer and the buyer, right? We will never increase capacity to a point where we don't feel like we can manage lines and manage restroom lines and manage consumer, ingress and egress. That is still primary for us. It's never been we have to get to 100,000 or 120,000 or 90,000, whatever the number is per day. It's always been about the fan experience first. So look, for us, it's really about evolution this year. We've luckily been very fortunate to build, over 30 different product experiences around our campus. And you're going to see us lean into those. The marina will be back amidst all of the ribbing that we get. We never take ourselves too seriously on that and are always happy for the media to give us a hard time. Hard Rock will be back, obviously, with their beach, and they've got a new set of entertainment. We're pleased to be able to build our podium on the south side of our stadium again, kind of right in the midst of one of our luxury areas, but with vision to really the campus pass buyer, which those tickets will go on sale here probably toward the end of January, which is our GA ticket. And look, we've also taken a page out of some of the other promoters' book, and we're selling a rotating pass. Grandstand pass, right? So a very American thing is to be able to sit in the stadium and see the whole field. And frankly, an American motorsports perspective is often sitting in a stadium and being able to see the majority of the racetrack. I remember 20 years ago when I was part of the build at Kansas Speedway, they really made this big point about how they were going to dig the racetrack down into the inner bowl so that from the third row of the grandstand, you could see the entire racetrack, right? So Americans are programmed to be able to see the entire environment in front of them. You put an F1 circuit in America, that's a hard ticket to get, right? Where you can sit and see the whole race circuit. So again, credit to Josh Young on our ticket sales team, but he said, look, we should be selling a rotating pass where you sit in multiple different grandstands on the different days, and let's price them accordingly. And those have sold really, really well for us. So we think we might be onto something there from the American consumer that's a little bit more, let's say, like curated for the experience that they expect. So look, we're really excited. Campus Pass will be huge for us. The paddock will be back on the field again with access to the general ticket buyer. And look, we're consistently proud of some of our luxury areas as well that continue to get a lot of headlines for us. But I would tell you that we're probably as focused this year as we've ever been on trying to make sure that the grandstand buyer and the, again, GA buyer that we call Campus Pass has an amazing experience I'll never forget.
Spoken like a true F1 professional. You've referenced it a couple of times, so I want to dig into a little bit, Tyler. Wichita. Did you think the guy from Wichita would be discussing things like paddock clubs and garages for Formula One?
And I have to clarify, I'm actually from Newton, so it's a suburb. It's a suburb of the huge metropolis of Wichita.
Newton, Kansas.
Newton, Kansas. Yeah. So look, I moved to Lawrence when I was 10, which is again a small town outside of Kansas City, which is where I grew up. Either way, there Newton, there's 16,000 people. It was a little railroad town, and Lawrence is still a 100,000 person college town. Where the University of Kansas is based. So look, I can't say enough. It's like all of our careers, though. Like, we have help from people who give us opportunities and get to kind of live out our childhood dreams, and I'm beyond blessed and fortunate. But without, Tom and Steve and so many other influences that I've had, there's no opportunity I'd be able to do this with this team of people.
Professional sports and racing, how did you get there? What was the stepping stone to get you where you are today?
Yeah. So, I was in law school back in Kansas after a very short-lived and very below average college tennis career out in North Carolina. And, I was hell bent on making sure that I didn't have to practice law for a living, frankly. And so I was, I interned, lived out of my car one summer, worked for this agency out in North Carolina, and kind of got hooked into the track promoter in Kansas, which was about 20 minutes from the law school. And I went, and they, a person at the agency kind of vouched for me, and I got in there as an intern and worked there all through school. And the NASCAR race, the year of, it would be in 2002. I was walking around with Joe Montana, and he had been a former partner of Chip Ganassi, CART. And so he wanted to go say hello to Chip. So we walked across the garage, and he popped up on the pit box. And of course, I stood down there, and my oversized pants and weird looking track shirt, and this guy comes up to me and starts talking to me, and we kind of hit it off a little bit. And that guy was Tom Garfinkel,
Hmm.
and so I went to work for him. A couple of months later, toward the end of my third year of law school, and um, I can't say enough about the road that he's taken me on. So we worked together at Ganassi, obviously, for almost 5 years, and then worked together again at Hall of Fame Racing, and where he was one of the owners, and I had the opportunity to GM at the experienced age of 29, and then had the opportunity to work in baseball together, and we split ways in the NFL, but then had the opportunity to come back and pursue something we both love, which is open wheel racing. So he's been beyond a blessing, and huge influence on me personally and professionally.
What'd you learn at Ganassi? We've had a number of
Yeah.
smart owners on this program. We have not had Chip, but
Yeah.
I think they all come from
Well,
the same milk.
yeah, look, you know what? I would say this. I do find myself, I find myself leaning back on those years a lot, Jason. Great people there. And as Chip will tell you, he doesn't always see eye to eye with everybody, and I was no different, and I was a snotty, mid-20s kid who probably didn't always say the right things or do the right things, but we did share a common passion for competing. And people that like to win and like to compete do well with Chip. Um, and Mike Hull and Barry and Scott Harner and those guys on the IndyCar side, and Andy Graves and Donnie Wingo and Jimmy Elledge and the guys on the NASCAR side, Tony Glover, those guys in a weird way had huge influences on me. I spent a lot of time, sitting in haulers and leaning on tires and learning kind of life lessons. I remember a long conversation one afternoon with JD Gibbs about why he does what he does and the influence of his dad and how he manages his family and being on the road. Like those are days I can't I wouldn't replace with anything. And look, Chip made that possible for me personally. I got to travel the country, and which I thought was like the greatest thing in the world. And I got to be a part of a competitive environment and learn some good lessons and some not good lessons. But the one thing that sticks with me mostly about Chip is his will. He wills things to happen, and he was very inspiring in that way. And to this day, there's arguably nobody is successful in American open wheel racing, with maybe one exception, which we all know who that might be. But he would shudder at that. But goodness sakes, to his credit, he taught me from the very beginning. It's all about getting the right people and then getting them all pulling in the right direction. I know it sounds simple, but it's hard to do, especially at a race team level.
We are very privileged at the shop to be able to have quite an eclectic mix of vintage Ferraris. We have one technician that solely works on the newer cars, but for the most part, everybody else specializes in the carbureted Ferraris. So everything from 330 GTCs, 275s, 250s, and we do a pretty solid, I'd say 50-50 mix between service and then full Pebble Beach Concours level restoration.
And are you busier now at this time of year than you would be at other times of the year? Or is it just a constant flow?
I think Concours circuit certainly affects our the rate at the shop, but for the most part, I would say we're always quite busy.
Not like those post-Christmas, oh, I got a Ferrari for Christmas, now I need to fix it, right?
Exactly. There's always something to do.
Excellent. Let's start off with why. Why Ferraris? Why this passion for vintage automobiles such as a Ferrari, which I know sparked a fire in you at an early age. But why not Porsches?
I think the Ferrari mark is the best representation of passion, engineering, and poise. Back in the day, at the Ferrari factory, they were pouring castings at their foundry to make engines without assigned chassis numbers, solely for experimental purposes, to try something new, to try and be the best they could be, just because they could, because it was a passion. And there are, plenty of other wonderful marques out there, but for me, Ferrari is truly the best of the best.
And is that a feeling that you've always had? I know you grew where you grew up had a huge influence on your interest in vintage cars and culture. Frankly, raised in LA, it's driving season all year round, and you're spending a lot of time in traffic.
Absolutely.
But
yeah,
how did that all develop?
So, like you said, I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I spent a lot of time in LA traffic staring out the window, entertaining myself by trying to acknowledge what cars had what powertrain, what engine in them. And I became obsessed and infatuated with the vintage cars. And from a very, very early age, I expressed my interest and my love and my desire to work on these types of cars. But my family never was bitten by the automotive bug. Nobody in my family shared that same passion. So I don't think they really understood it when, they were hearing a 4-year-old say they wanted to learn how to change engine oil and rebuild a motor. So it was just more of a secret hobby that I kept. And I was solely on the enthusiast side, always admiring, for the most part, all vintage cars, of course, Ferraris. But at the time, everything was sort of equal in my eye, an equal level of infatuation. And then the interest in pursuing a career, specifically restoring vintage Ferraris, developed about 2 years ago when I started my time at McPherson College.
But let me go back to one thing you said. You said that nobody
Sure.
was really interested you were in a car-centric family, but your grandfather drove a 66 Mustang. So, I mean, he had some taste in cars.
Sure. I think he certainly loved it and loved the power, loved the style, but he wasn't the one working on it. And I think being on the enthusiast side, while you still have that passion there, it's very different from, I think, the passion that drives you to wrench on those types of cars.
So, what was your first memory of wrenching on a vehicle? What how did that develop, that piece of it? Because male or female, young or old, I mean, that comes from somewhere. And where did that come from for you?
So, believe it or not, my first time wrenching on a car was not until I had already enrolled at McPherson College and had started with my very first class, which was engine rebuilding. So prior to my time there, I had no automotive experience or knowledge, just a passion and an enthusiasm for the industry.
And what led you to McPherson College? And maybe give the listener a little bit of an overview of McPherson for those who are uninitiated, as they say.
Sure. So McPherson College is the only 4-year university in the United States where you can earn a Bachelor of Science degree in automotive restoration. It's one of one. It's semi-difficult to get into. They only accept about 30 students a year. And it is truly a hub located in McPherson, Kansas, central Kansas, where there are about 150 students in the program, all like-minded, all with a true heart and a true passion for vintage cars. And as far as my interest in attending the school, we might need to circle back to the beginning of
Sure.
the story a little bit more. So, like I said, I didn't have anyone in my family that was interested in the automotive industry or had any hands-on experience. And I wasn't really encouraged. And I think partially that's because I came from a very traditional family where boys were boys and girls were girls, if you will. But part of that is also me just sort of, accepting that state and not really having the vocabulary to protest it at such a young age. So from a young age, my goal was to always move to the middle of nowhere and learn myself how to restore classic cars, because I wasn't grandfathered in, and I was sort of subject myself to stereotyping the industry, thinking you could only become a mechanic if you sort of grew up doing it. And trade schools and tech schools, as fantastic as they are, they're straight shots into dealerships working on modern cars, and that never quite fit the bill. So I had this route in my mind as far as what my path was going to look like. And it wasn't until the pandemic hit that I had some time to reflect and kind of realize how unhappy I was with my chosen path. And I asked myself one question, and it was whether or not I have the expertise to do so or the knowledge to do so, and whether or not I get paid for it or not, what is it genuinely that I want to be doing all day, every day? And it was restoring classic cars. So previously I had done a few Google searches looking for car schools, but nothing, again, like quite fit the bill. So I switched my search this time to automotive restoration school, and that was when McPherson College came up.
And what did mom and dad say?
Oh, I mean, it was Victoria. She's always had that sort of little hobby, but nobody ever took it seriously. So I think my family, for, you know, the 9 months leading up to my start date, wasn't necessarily sure if I was going to go through with it. And, you know, it wasn't until a couple weeks before, when I had all the arrangements made, you know, I had sort of locked in my tuition and was moving forward, that they realized that it was my reality.
You thought, God, she's actually going to do it.
Yeah, but I think for them, because they're so not, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, you're kind of a car person or you're not. They're really, it's pretty black and white to some degree, and they're very much not car people. So I think it was a little difficult for them to understand why somebody would have a passion for it. But once they realized how strong that enthusiasm really was, then they, of course, were very supportive.
And they didn't know that you were actually watching YouTube videos as a hobby on the side and Googling information about cars regularly, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's what you were doing in LA. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you pick up and decide during COVID, actually, when the pandemic hit, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That this university called McPherson College will teach you how to restore cars, as you said, Bachelor of Science in Automotive Restoration. But you're a junior at this point, correct? You were studying something else?
Yes. So I had completed 2 years of just general education requirements at community college, on the off chance that I ever did want to go back and complete a degree. But I wasn't too sure. I wasn't really set on, because I wasn't passionate about any of the subject matters at community college. I didn't move forward. So I said, you know what, I'll go halfway on the off chance that I do ever want to go back.
First impressions when you got there? McPherson?
Well, I grew up in a city with 8 million people. And without ever having visited Kansas, I committed to 2 years to living in a town with a population in the busy season of about 13,000 people. So
you're not
it
in
was
LA
very
anymore.
No. Yes, correct. So I think I just dove headfirst and embraced it for everything that it is. And really, I think, kept myself busy with my studies, again, because I was starting with a completely clean slate. So I had a lot to catch up on to be up to speed sort of with where the other students were at with their hands-on skill set. But it was incredible. Probably the best decision I've ever made is moving to McPherson. And
can you talk a little bit about being the recipient of a rather prestigious Piston Foundation scholarship? How did that come to pass?
Sure. So I think McPherson College has quite a weight on their shoulders. They are responsible for the next generation of automotive restorers. They are the ones that are educating them, allowing them to develop their skill set, but also providing them with opportunity. So it was initially through the school that I found out about the scholarship opportunity with the Piston Foundation. And the foundation, the mission statement, the goals really resonated with me because they care so much about the collector car industry and protecting it and preserving it and making sure the next generation of restorers are supported. So that way, this industry, this incredible industry that reflects kinetic art and so much passion, protecting that for future generations. So it was a true honor to have been a recipient um, uh, of that scholarship, and also to be able to earn a Bachelor of Science degree takes a lot of work, but it also takes a lot of money. So to have that financial assistance was certainly a huge relief as well.
So interestingly, you right after graduation, which was how many years ago?
This past May of 2023.
Right. You joined Patrick Otis' company as a vintage Ferrari mechanic. And now, how did that come to pass? And by the way, how many other women were you working next to?
Zero.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can circle back to that subject later, but I'll answer this question. Patrick Otis is an incredible Ferrari mechanic. He has over 5 decades of experience. He trained under Alf Francis, Stephen Griswold, and he's been under his own shop for the last 40 years or so. And if you're in the vintage Ferrari industry, or if you own a vintage Ferrari, you know who Patrick Otis is. So I, of course, had known the name and known the work and had a huge passion for vintage Ferraris, and also had made the decision that I wanted to go into the mechanical side of the restoration industry. So I wish it were more elaborate than this, but I just gave him a phone call. I was going to be in the area for Monterey Car Week, and I said who I was, what school I attended, and he was incredibly kind and welcoming and said, come on over, ask as many questions as you want to, stay for as long as you want. And I showed up, we chatted, we got along great. I chatted with his son Tazio as well, who works there. And I ended up staying for about 5 hours. They asked me maybe an hour or so in, hey, do you want to assemble these 225 sport heads? And I said, sure. And so I went ahead and assembled them. And the next question was, hey, what are you doing after you graduate? So
the rest was history.
The rest was history, yeah. So I graduated and then immediately began working as a full-time vintage Ferrari mechanic.
And no 2 days in the office, so to speak, are the same. And let's go back to what you said a moment ago. You only work on the mechanical side of the restoration in the shop. And
correct.
For those who don't know, that's either related to drivetrain, engine, brakes. So you can be working on anything at any one time. And every project, I'm guessing, with vintage Ferraris is challenging in its own way.
Sure. I mean, I think that's part of why I love what I do so much, is because there's always something new. And granted, some cars have some repeat problems, so it is nice to be able to develop that sort of familiarity to be able to diagnose issues. But at the same time, something my boss says on the daily basis is, I never go a week without having learned something new. And he's been doing this again for over 5 decades. I'm pretty green. I've only been doing this full time for 6 months, but not a day goes by where I don't learn something new or see something new. And to know that in 50 years that will still be the case is really what inspires me and fulfills me.
Are there any challenges that you've met that you didn't think could possibly occur yet? I mean, I know you worked on a 365 GTB for Daytona engine, right? You rebuilt one of those. I mean, let's give people a real day in the life. How detailed does this get, Victoria? I'm guessing fairly detailed.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, An engine is an engine. A Ferrari engine is going to run, or an internal combustion engine is going to run the same as a small block Chevy does. It's the same principles, if you will. So if you have a solid foundation, I think that's what is really going to get you through it. If you run into an issue, you always go back to the basics. With this 365 motor, for example, it's been a ton of fun to be able to see all of the wear and all of the damage. This car had a water pump failure, so there was water all through the combustion chambers, which is, for those of you who don't know, not where water is supposed to be in your engine. So not only was everything seized together, but as far as analyzing issues for the rebuild and figuring out, what type of new pistons we should have made, what type of valves we should have made, sort of what direction we should go in. That is incredibly exciting, but it's also a collaborative effort. I'm surrounded by masters of their craft. I'm the rookie, if you will, but they've been so welcoming and so encouraging. Nobody is above one another. Everybody is always willing to ask one another for help, because they're also trying to be the best they can be. So it's nice to be surrounded by such a passionate group.
How many people work at Patrick Otis?
5 of us. It's a pretty small group. Yeah. So you walk in and it feels pretty quiet for the most part, but everybody's, busy in their space working away.
And how much traffic does Patrick Otis get on a regular basis? I'm guessing you're probably booked up for the next couple of years, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, we're really privileged. We really get to pick and choose what jobs we want to do. Like I said, I'm really passionate about the carbureted cars. I also really love the early 4-cylinder Lampredi motors. So when we have, 20 people calling in, Patrick turns to us and says, what is it that you want to work on out of all of these projects? So it's nice to be able to be selective in that sort of way.